Miguel felt Thunder's body convulse beneath him as the crocodile's teeth pierced deep into the horse's flesh, blood darkening the water around them. What Thunder did in the next 60 seconds would defy every instinct of a prey animal and leave witnesses speechless. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The morning sun hung low over the valley, casting golden rays across the landscape, where the river wound its way through dense vegetation and ancient trees. The air was thick with humidity, and the distant calls of exotic birds echoed through the wilderness. This was a place where nature ruled supreme, untamed and unforgiving, where every creature fought daily for survival, in an eternal dance between predator and prey. Miguel Reyes had lived his entire life in the small village nestled at the edge of this wild territory. A seasoned rancher with weathered hands and eyes that had seen too many dry seasons, he understood the rhythms of this land better than anyone. His small ranch was modest, a collection of wooden structures that had withstood countless storms, and a handful of animals that represented everything he owned in this world. Among them was Thunder, a magnificent chestnut stallion whose coat gleamed like polished copper in the sunlight. Thunder was no ordinary horse. Miguel had raised him from a foal, nursing him through sickness, and training him with patience and love. The bond between man and animal ran deeper than words could express. Thunder was intelligent, strong, and loyal beyond measure. His eyes held a spark of understanding that seemed almost human, and Miguel often found himself talking to the horse as if he were an old friend who could comprehend every word. That particular morning, Miguel stood at the edge of his property, gazing across the river that separated his land from the northern pastures. The drought had been merciless that year, turning the usually lush fields into brittle patches of yellow grass. The northern side, however, still held some green, fed by underground springs that refused to surrender to the relentless heat. Miguel knew he needed to move Thunder and the other animals across the river to where food was more abundant. But the crossing filled him with an uneasy dread he couldn't quite explain. The river, usually calm and shallow during this season, had changed. Recent rains upstream had swollen its waters, and the current moved with a deceptive strength that could sweep away anything in its path. But it wasn't just the water that worried Miguel. There had been reports from neighboring villages, whispered stories told in hushed tones around evening fires. A massive crocodile had been spotted in these waters, larger than any seen in living memory. Some claimed it was over 20 feet long, a prehistoric monster with jaws powerful enough to crush bone like dry wood. Miguel had dismissed these tales as exaggerations, the kind of stories that grew with each retelling. He had crossed this river hundreds of times over the years and had never encountered anything more dangerous than a curious water snake. Yet, something in his gut told him to be cautious, to wait another day, perhaps another week. But the animals needed to eat, and Thunder in particular had been growing restless, sensing his owner's anxiety. As Miguel prepared for the crossing, he checked Thunder's saddle and bridle with extra care, his fingers moving through the familiar motions while his mind wandered to darker possibilities. Thunder stood patiently, occasionally turning his head to nuzzle Miguel's shoulder as if offering reassurance. The other horses and cattle had already been moved to a holding pen near the river's edge, their eyes watching the water with the instinctive wariness that all prey animals possess. The plan was simple. Miguel would lead Thunder across first, establishing a safe path that the others could follow. The horse was strong enough to handle the current, and Miguel trusted him completely. They had faced challenges before and had always emerged victorious, This crossing would be no different, or so Miguel tried to convince himself as he mounted Thunder and guided him toward the water's edge. Thunder hesitated for just a moment, his hooves dancing at the boundary between dry land and the river. He snorted, his ears swiveling forward and back, processing sounds and scents that Miguel's human senses couldn't detect. The horse's muscles tensed beneath the saddle, and Miguel felt the animal's uncertainty transmitted through the reins he held loosely in his hands. "Easy, boy," Miguel whispered, leaning forward to stroke Thunder's neck with one calloused hand. "We've done this 1,000 times. Just a quick crossing, and we'll be on the other side before you know it." The words were meant to comfort both of them, though Miguel's voice carried a tremor he couldn't quite suppress. With gentle pressure from Miguel's legs, Thunder stepped into the water. The river was cooler than expected, and the current immediately pulled at the horse's legs with surprising force. Thunder moved carefully, each step measured and deliberate as he navigated the rocky bottom. Miguel kept his weight balanced, trusting his companion's sure-footedness while scanning the water ahead for any signs of danger. They were about a third of the way across when Miguel first noticed the disturbance in the water. About 50 yards downstream, the surface rippled in a way that didn't match the current's natural flow. Something large was moving beneath the surface, creating a wake that spoke of enormous size and power. Miguel's heart began to pound as he realized that the village stories might not have been exaggerations after all. Thunder sensed it too. The horse's entire body went rigid, his head raised high as his nostrils flared wide, drawing in the scents carried on the breeze. A low, trembling whinny escaped from Thunder's throat, a sound Miguel had never heard him make before. It was a sound of pure, primal fear that sent ice through Miguel's veins. "Turn back!" Miguel's instincts screamed at him, but they were already too far from either shore. The water here was at its deepest, reaching Thunder's chest and making any quick movement dangerous. Miguel's hands tightened on the reins as he tried to decide whether to push forward or retreat. In that moment of hesitation, the decision was made for them. The water exploded in a violent eruption of foam and spray. What emerged from the depths was a creature from nightmares, a massive crocodile whose scarred hide spoke of countless battles and decades of survival. Its eyes, cold and calculating, locked onto Thunder with the focused intensity of a predator that had already claimed its prey in its mind. The beast was even larger than the wildest village stories had described, easily over 25 feet from snout to tail, with a body as thick as an ancient tree trunk. Miguel barely had time to register what was happening before the crocodile lunged. Its massive jaws opened wide, revealing rows of yellowed teeth that had crushed the life from countless victims over the years. The creature moved with shocking speed for something so large, its powerful tail propelling it through the water like a torpedo aimed directly at Thunder's vulnerable legs. Thunder reared up in terror, his front hooves slashing at the air as a high-pitched scream tore from his throat. The sudden movement nearly threw Miguel from the saddle, and he had to grab desperately at Thunder's mane to keep from plunging into the water. The horse's eyes were wide with fear, showing white all around. But beneath that terror was something else, a fierce determination to survive that matched the ferocity of the monster attacking them. The crocodile's first strike missed Thunder's legs by mere inches as the horse twisted away with remarkable agility. But the beast was relentless, and Miguel knew that, in the water, they were fighting on the crocodile's territory, in its element, where it held every advantage. The current continued to push against them, making it difficult for Thunder to maintain his footing on the slippery river bottom while simultaneously trying to evade the massive predator. Miguel's mind raced through his limited options. He had a knife strapped to his belt, But what good would such a small blade do against an armored creature of this size? His rifle was back on the shore, useless to him now. All he had was Thunder's strength, the horse's will to live, and his own desperate determination to protect the animal that meant more to him than his own life. The crocodile circled back, its massive body creating waves that rocked Thunder and threatened to sweep his legs out from under him. Miguel could see the intelligence in the predator's eyes, the calculated patience of a hunter that knew time was on its side. Every second they remained in the water increased the crocodile's advantage and decreased their chances of survival. Thunder, sensing Miguel's fear and feeding off his own survival instinct, began moving toward the far shore with renewed urgency. His powerful legs churned through the water, fighting against both the current and the weight of his rider. The horse's breathing came in harsh gasps, his nostrils flaring wide as he struggled to keep his head above the surface. Miguel leaned forward, making himself as small as possible to reduce the resistance, willing every ounce of his strength into his companion. But the crocodile had no intention of letting its prey escape. With a sudden burst of speed, it surged forward, its tail whipping through the water with enough force to create a small wave. This time, the massive jaws clamped down on Thunder's hindquarters, the teeth sinking into muscle and flesh. Thunder's scream of pain and rage echoed across the river, a sound so filled with agony that it seemed to freeze time itself. Miguel felt the impact as the crocodile's weight pulled backward on Thunder, threatening to drag both horse and rider under the water. The horse stumbled, his front legs buckling as he fought to maintain his balance against the crushing pressure of those ancient jaws. Blood began to color the water around them, dark ribbons spreading through the current like ink. In that moment, something fundamental changed in Thunder. The fear in his eyes transformed into something harder, something defiant. Despite the excruciating pain, despite the terror that must have been coursing through every fiber of his being, Thunder fought back. He reared again, this time deliberately, using his weight and the power of his front hooves as weapons. When he came down, those hooves struck the crocodile's head with tremendous force, the sound of impact echoing like gunshots across the water. The crocodile, surprised by this unexpected resistance, loosened its grip slightly. It was the opening Thunder needed. With a surge of strength that seemed to come from somewhere deep within his spirit, the horse lunged forward, tearing himself free from those terrible jaws. More blood flowed from the wounds, but Thunder didn't stop. He pressed on toward the far shore, each step an act of pure willpower. Miguel's heart was pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. He could feel Thunder's pain in every labored movement, could sense the horse's determination not to give up, not to let the monster win. Tears streamed down Miguel's face as he urged Thunder onward, his voice hoarse as he shouted encouragement that was barely audible over the sound of splashing water and the crocodile's furious hissing. The predator wasn't finished. Enraged by the injury to its pride and the escape of what should have been an easy meal, the crocodile pursued with renewed fury. Its powerful tail created waves that crashed over Thunder's back, and its jaws snapped at the horse's legs with mechanical precision. Each attack was a dance with death, each evasion a miracle of timing and instinct. Thunder's legs were tiring, the blood loss and the constant exertion taking their toll. Miguel could feel the horse's strength waning beneath him, could sense that they were reaching the limits of what Thunder could endure. The far shore was tantalizingly close now, perhaps 20 yards away, but it might as well have been 20 miles. The water was still deep enough for the crocodile to maneuver, still deep enough for it to drag them both under if it got another solid grip. The crocodile attacked again, this time aiming for Thunder's neck, going for a killing blow. Miguel saw it coming and did the only thing he could think of. He threw himself sideways, his body acting as a shield between the massive jaws and Thunder's vulnerable throat. The movement unbalanced both of them, and for a terrifying moment, they were both going under. The cold water closed over Miguel's head, and for a moment, the world became a muffled, chaotic blur of bubbles and swirling currents. He could feel Thunder thrashing beside him, could sense the massive presence of the crocodile somewhere in the murky water. Miguel's lungs burned as he fought his way back to the surface, his hands still tangled in Thunder's mane, refusing to let go even as the river tried to tear them apart. When his head broke through the surface, Miguel gasped for air, choking on water that had flooded into his mouth and nose. Thunder was beside him, the horse's powerful neck straining to keep his head above water. The current had pushed them several yards downstream, closer to the shore, but also into shallower water where the rocks were sharper and more treacherous. Miguel could see blood streaming from the wounds on Thunder's hindquarters, the water around them stained crimson. The crocodile surfaced a few feet away, its massive body creating waves that threatened to swamp them both. The beast seemed even larger now, if that was possible, its scarred hide glistening in the sunlight like ancient armor. There was something almost prehistoric about it, as if it had been pulled from the depths of time itself, a remnant of an age when such monsters ruled the earth without challenge. Miguel knew they couldn't survive much longer in the water. Thunder was weakening with each passing moment, his movements becoming more sluggish as blood loss and exhaustion took their toll. The horse's breathing was labored, harsh gasps that spoke of pain and desperate effort. Yet still, Thunder fought on, his hooves scraping against the rocky bottom as he tried to find purchase, tried to drag them both toward safety. The crocodile circled again, patient and methodical. It had all the time in the world, or so it seemed to believe. Miguel could see the calculation in those cold, reptilian eyes, the ancient intelligence that had survived countless hunts just like this one. The beast knew that its prey was tiring, knew that eventually Thunder's strength would give out, and the kill would be easy. But Thunder had other ideas. Despite his wounds, despite the terror that must have been coursing through his veins, the horse refused to be just another victim. When the crocodile made its next pass, coming in fast with jaws gaping wide, Thunder met the attack head-on. Instead of trying to evade, the horse pivoted on his hind legs and kicked out with both front hooves, striking the crocodile squarely on the snout with tremendous force. The impact was devastating. The crocodile's head snapped to the side, and for the first time since the attack began, the creature showed something that might have been pain or at least surprise. It retreated several feet, its tail thrashing the water into foam as it reassessed this prey that refused to submit to the natural order of predator and prey. Miguel used those precious seconds to urge Thunder toward the shore with every ounce of strength he had left. His voice was raw from shouting, his throat burned from the river water he had swallowed, but he kept calling to Thunder, kept encouraging the magnificent animal to push forward just a little more, just a few more steps. The horse responded, his muscles bunching and releasing as he fought against the current and his own failing strength. They were in waist-deep water now, shallow enough that Miguel could touch bottom if he slid from Thunder's back. But he didn't dare dismount, knowing that his weight on solid ground might somehow help Thunder maintain his balance. The rocks beneath the water were slippery with algae, and one wrong step could send them both tumbling back into the deeper water where the crocodile waited. The massive predator had recovered from Thunder's strike and was coming at them again, more cautiously this time but no less determined. Its movements were different now, more measured, as if it had learned to respect this prey that fought back with such ferocity. The crocodile's tail swept back and forth, propelling it forward in short bursts of speed that sent water spraying in all directions. Thunder saw it coming and positioned himself sideways, presenting less of a target while keeping his powerful hind legs ready to strike. The horse was learning, adapting to this battle in real time with an intelligence that went beyond mere animal instinct. Miguel could feel the tension in Thunder's body, could sense the horse calculating distances and timing just as the crocodile was doing. When the crocodile lunged, Thunder was ready. The horse spun with surprising agility for an animal his size, his back legs lashing out in a devastating kick that caught the crocodile on its flank. The force of the blow created a visible dent in the creature's armored hide, and the beast let out a hiss that sounded like steam escaping from a boiling kettle. It was a sound of pain and fury, of a predator that had encountered something it hadn't expected. Miguel felt a surge of hope. They were winning. Against all odds, against a creature that should have killed them within the first minute of the encounter, they were actually winning. Thunder's courage and strength were making the impossible possible, turning what should have been a one-sided slaughter into a genuine fight for survival. But victory was not yet assured. The crocodile, though wounded and wary, was far from defeated. It began circling again, wider this time, looking for an opening, a moment of weakness it could exploit. Miguel could see the shore was tantalizingly close now, perhaps 10 more yards. If they could just maintain their defense for a little longer, if Thunder's strength could hold out just a bit more, they would make it. Thunder took another step toward the shore, then another. Each movement was carefully calculated, the horse never taking his eyes off the circling predator. Miguel matched his breathing to Thunder's, their hearts beating in synchronization, two beings united in their desperate struggle to survive. The bond between them had transcended the normal relationship between man and animal, becoming something deeper, something almost spiritual in its intensity. The crocodile's patience was wearing thin. Miguel could sense it in the way the creature's movements became more aggressive, more reckless. The calculated stalking had given way to something rawer, more primal. The beast was no longer content to wait for its prey to weaken. It wanted this fight over, wanted to assert its dominance over these intruders who had dared to challenge it in its own domain. Thunder sensed the change, too. The horse's ears were flat against his head now, his eyes tracking every movement the crocodile made. Despite the pain from his wounds, despite the exhaustion that must have been seeping into his very bones, Thunder stood firm. His legs were planted wide in the rocky riverbed, his stance that of a warrior preparing for a final confrontation. There was no thought of retreat in the horse's posture, only the determination to see this battle through to whatever end awaited them. Miguel's hands were cramping from gripping Thunder's mane so tightly, but he didn't dare relax his hold. His wet clothes clung to his body, heavy and cold despite the tropical heat. He could taste blood in his mouth from where he had bitten his lip during one of Thunder's violent movements, could feel bruises forming on his legs from being slammed against the horse's sides. But none of that mattered. All that mattered was getting Thunder to safety, protecting this magnificent creature who had given him so much over the years. The crocodile made its move with shocking suddenness. It came straight at them this time, no circling, no feinting, just a direct charge that sent water exploding upward in great sheets of spray. Its jaws were open wide enough to swallow a man whole, and the sound it made was like nothing Miguel had ever heard. A deep rumbling roar that seemed to come from the very depths of the earth itself. Thunder met the charge without flinching. As the crocodile bore down on them, the horse reared up, his front hooves rising high above the water. For a moment, they were frozen in a tableau that seemed to capture the eternal struggle between courage and terror, between the will to survive and the inevitability of death. Then, Thunder's hooves came down with all the force his powerful legs could generate, striking the crocodile directly on top of its head. The impact was tremendous. Miguel felt the shock wave travel through Thunder's body and into his own. The crocodile's forward momentum stopped as if it had hit a wall, and for a brief instant, the massive creature seemed stunned, its predatory focus disrupted by the unexpected pain. Thunder didn't give it time to recover. The horse struck again, and then again, his hooves rising and falling in a rhythm that was both beautiful and terrible to witness. Each strike drove the crocodile back, each blow carved out a tiny space of safety in the deadly waters. Miguel held on with everything he had, his body moving in harmony with Thunder's, two beings united in their desperate dance of survival. He could hear voices from the shore now, realized that people from both sides of the river had gathered to witness this epic battle. Their shouts carried across the water, but Miguel couldn't make out the words. All his focus was on Thunder, on supporting his companion however he could. The crocodile retreated several yards, its massive body creating waves that rocked Thunder, but no longer threatened to topple him. The beast was bleeding now from several wounds on its head and snout, dark blood mixing with the river water. But it was far from finished. Crocodiles were ancient survivors, creatures that had outlived the dinosaurs through sheer tenacity and adaptability. This one had not survived for decades by giving up easily. Thunder took advantage of the momentary respite to push toward the shore. The water was shallower here, barely reaching his knees, and Miguel could feel solid ground beneath them. They were so close to safety now, perhaps 5 more yards, and they would be clear of the water entirely. But those 5 yards might as well have been 5 miles with the crocodile between them and the shore. The beast moved to block their path, positioning itself directly in line with the shore. Its body formed a living barrier, a wall of muscle and teeth and ancient malevolence. The crocodile's tail swept back and forth, stirring up mud from the river bottom and creating a murky cloud that obscured the water around it. Miguel realized what it was doing. The creature was trying to hide its exact position, trying to strike from concealment. Thunder understood the danger too. The horse moved sideways, parallel to the shore, trying to find a route around the crocodile rather than through it. His movements were slower now, more deliberate, conserving what little strength remained. Miguel could feel the trembling in Thunder's legs, the way his breathing had become ragged and uneven. The horse was running on pure willpower now, his body pushed far beyond its normal limits. The crocodile matched their movements, sliding through the water with eerie silence. It was a game of positioning, each combatant trying to gain the advantage. Miguel's mind raced, trying to think of something, anything that might tip the scales in their favor. His hand went to the knife at his belt, pulling it free from its sheath. The blade was small, barely 6 inches long, but it was sharp, and it was something. Thunder made a sudden decision. Instead of continuing to try to circle around the crocodile, the horse charged straight at it. Miguel barely had time to register what was happening before they were upon the beast. Thunder's hooves struck at the crocodile's body, targeting its eyes, its snout, any vulnerable spot the horse could reach. Miguel leaned down, slashing with his knife at the creature's hide, knowing his blade could barely penetrate the armored scales, but needing to do something, anything to help. The crocodile's tail whipped around with devastating force, catching Thunder's front legs and nearly toppling both horse and rider. Miguel felt himself sliding sideways, his grip on Thunder's mane the only thing keeping him from plunging into the water beside the thrashing predator. The knife flew from his hand, disappearing into the murky depths. Thunder stumbled but didn't fall, his incredible balance and determination keeping them upright against impossible odds. For a moment, horse and crocodile were locked together in a terrible embrace, neither willing to yield, neither able to gain the decisive advantage. Miguel could see the strain in every muscle of Thunder's body, could hear the labored breathing that spoke of a heart pushed to its absolute limits. The horse's coat was dark with sweat and river water, his wounds still bleeding freely, yet he fought on with a ferocity that defied comprehension. Then, something changed in the crocodile's behavior. Perhaps it was the cumulative effect of Thunder's relentless attacks, or perhaps some survival instinct told it that this prey was too costly to pursue further. Whatever the reason, the massive predator suddenly disengaged, its powerful tail propelling it backward into deeper water. For several long seconds, it remained there, watching them with those cold, calculating eyes, as if committing their images to memory for some future encounter. Thunder didn't wait to see if the crocodile would change its mind. The horse lunged toward the shore with the last reserves of his strength, his hooves churning through the shallow water, kicking up mud and stones. Miguel clung to his back, afraid to hope, afraid to believe that they had actually survived this nightmare. Behind them, the crocodile sank slowly beneath the surface, disappearing into the depths as silently as it had emerged. The moment Thunder's hooves touched dry land, his legs buckled. The horse collapsed onto the muddy bank, his sides heaving with the effort of drawing breath. Miguel tumbled free, landing hard on his shoulder, but feeling no pain through the adrenaline that still flooded his system. He scrambled to his knees, his hands immediately going to Thunder, checking the wounds, assessing the damage with trembling fingers. The injuries were worse than Miguel had initially thought. Deep puncture wounds marked Thunder's hindquarters where the crocodile's teeth had sunk in, and there were lacerations along his legs from the rocky river bottom. Blood continued to flow, though not as heavily as before. The horse's eyes were glazed with pain and exhaustion, his magnificent body pushed beyond the limits of what any animal should have to endure. People were running toward them now, villagers from both sides of the river who had witnessed the incredible battle. Their voices reached Miguel as if from a great distance, words of amazement and disbelief mixing with offers of help. Someone threw a blanket over Thunder's trembling body, while others brought clean water and cloth to tend to the wounds. Miguel heard himself thanking them, heard his own voice explaining what had happened, but it all felt surreal, like he was watching the scene from outside his own body. An old woman pushed through the crowd, her weathered face creased with concern. She was known throughout the region as a healer, someone who understood the ways of animals and plants, whose remedies had saved countless lives over the decades. She knelt beside Thunder, her experienced hands moving gently over the horse's body, assessing each wound with practiced efficiency. Miguel watched her face for any sign of what she was thinking, desperate for some indication that Thunder would survive. She looked up at Miguel, and he saw something in her eyes that made his heart clench. It was respect, certainly, and amazement at what this horse had accomplished. But there was also concern, a wariness that spoke of how close to the edge Thunder was teetering. We need to stop the bleeding and get him somewhere safe where I can properly clean these wounds. He's lost a lot of blood, but he's strong. If any horse can survive this, it's him. With the help of several men, they carefully moved Thunder away from the water's edge to a flat area of grass beneath a large tree. The horse allowed himself to be guided, his steps unsteady but determined. Even now, even in this state, Thunder's spirit refused to be broken. Miguel walked beside him, one hand resting on the horse's neck, feeling the warmth of his companion's body, grateful beyond words that they were both still alive. The healer worked quickly and efficiently, cleaning the wounds with water mixed with herbs that she pulled from a pouch at her waist. Thunder flinched at the touch, but didn't try to move away, as if understanding that this pain was necessary was part of healing. She packed the deepest wounds with a paste made from crushed leaves and bound them with strips of clean cloth that the villagers provided. Throughout the process, she murmured words in an old dialect that Miguel barely understood, prayers or incantations meant to speed the healing. As the immediate crisis passed and Thunder's condition stabilized, Miguel finally allowed himself to fully process what had happened. They had faced death in its most primal form, and had emerged victorious through courage, determination, and the unbreakable bond between them. Thunder had saved Miguel's life just as surely as Miguel had tried to save Thunder's. They were bound together now by this shared trauma, this mutual act of salvation. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The river continued to flow as it always had, indifferent to the drama that had played out in its waters. Somewhere in those depths, the crocodile nursed its wounds and perhaps contemplated the strange prey that had refused to die. But on the shore, surrounded by amazed villagers and bathed in the golden light of evening, Thunder rested with Miguel beside him. The first night after the attack was the longest of Miguel's life. He refused to leave Thunder's side, sleeping on the ground beside the horse, wrapped in a thin blanket that one of the villagers had provided. Every few hours, he would wake to check on Thunder, placing his hand on the horse's neck to feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, reassuring himself that his companion was still alive, still fighting. Thunder slept fitfully, his body twitching occasionally as he relived the terror of the attack in his dreams. Sometimes he would jerk awake with a startled snort, his eyes wide and searching, until they found Miguel in the darkness. Only then would the horse relax again, comforted by the presence of the man who had stayed with him through the worst moment of his life. Miguel would whisper soft words of encouragement, running his hands along Thunder's neck, until the horse drifted back into uneasy sleep. By the second day, Thunder showed signs of improvement. The bleeding had stopped completely, and the swelling around the wounds had begun to subside, thanks to the healer's poultices and careful attention. The horse was able to stand for short periods, though his movements were stiff and clearly painful. Miguel helped support him during these attempts, bearing as much of Thunder's weight as his own tired body could manage. The villagers brought food and supplies, more than Miguel could have hoped for or expected. They came in a steady stream throughout the day, each person wanting to see the legendary horse who had battled a giant crocodile and lived to tell the tale. Children stared with wide eyes, whispering among themselves about Thunder's bravery. Old men nodded with respect, understanding that they had witnessed something extraordinary, something that would be spoken of for generations to come. One visitor stood out among the rest. His name was Carlos, a wealthy rancher from the next valley who owned the finest horses in the region. He had heard about the attack and had traveled for hours to see Thunder with his own eyes. Carlos circled the horse slowly, examining him with the practiced eye of someone who knew horseflesh better than most men knew their own families. When he finally spoke, his words surprised everyone present. "I want to buy him." "Name your price, Miguel. Whatever you're asking, I'll double it. A horse with this kind of spirit, this kind of courage, he's worth more than gold. I have the best veterinarians, the finest facilities. I can give him everything he needs to recover fully." The offer hung in the air like a physical presence. Miguel felt every eye turn toward him, waiting to hear his response. The amount of money Carlos was suggesting was staggering, enough to transform Miguel's struggling ranch into something prosperous, enough to secure his future for years to come. It was the kind of opportunity that men like him rarely encountered in their lifetimes. Miguel looked at Thunder, at the horse who had carried him through the deadliest waters, who had fought with every ounce of strength to keep them both alive. He thought about the years they had spent together, the quiet mornings when it was just the two of them watching the sun rise over the valley, the unspoken understanding that flowed between them. Money could buy many things, but it could never buy what he and Thunder shared. He's not for sale, Carlos, not for any price. Thunder belongs here, with me, and that's where he'll stay until one of us draws our last breath. I appreciate your offer, truly I do. But some things in this world aren't meant to be sold. Carlos studied Miguel's face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. A faint smile crossed his features, something that might have been approval, or perhaps recognition of a kindred spirit. I understand. Not every man would turn down that kind of money, especially for a wounded horse. But I can see the bond between you two. It's rare, precious even. You're a fortunate man, Miguel, to have found such a companion. After Carlos left, the healer returned to change Thunder's bandages and check his progress. She worked in silence for several minutes before speaking, her voice low enough that only Miguel could hear. You made the right choice. This horse, he doesn't need fancy stables or expensive treatments. What he needs is you, the man who knows his heart, who understands his spirit. That's worth more than all the gold in the world. As the days passed, Thunder grew stronger. The wounds began to heal, leaving scars that would mark his body for the rest of his life, but would never diminish his magnificence. He started eating again, tentatively at first, then with increasing appetite. Miguel took this as a sign that Thunder's will to live was reasserting itself, that the trauma was beginning to fade into memory rather than remaining an open wound. On the 5th day, Thunder walked on his own for the first time since the attack. It was only a few steps, from the shade of the tree to a patch of grass a dozen feet away. But to Miguel, it was as significant as if the horse had run a mile. He walked beside Thunder, matching his pace, ready to support him if he stumbled. But Thunder didn't stumble. Each step was deliberate and sure, a declaration that he was still the same proud, strong animal he had always been. The other animals that Miguel owned had been successfully moved across the river at a different crossing point, one that was shallower and reportedly free of crocodiles. But Miguel found himself unable to think about returning to his normal routine. Thunder's recovery consumed all his thoughts and energy. He slept beside the horse every night, woke with him every morning, and spent his days tending to Thunder's needs. The village had transformed into something of a pilgrimage site. Word of Thunder's battle with the crocodile had spread far beyond the immediate region, carried by travelers and merchants along the trade routes that connected the scattered settlements. People came from distant villages, some walking for days just to see the horse, who had defied death itself. They brought gifts of food, medicine, and supplies, treating Thunder with the reverence usually reserved for sacred relics. Miguel found himself overwhelmed by the attention and generosity. He had always lived a quiet life, content with his small ranch and the simple rhythm of his days. Now he was thrust into a role he never sought, the guardian of a living legend. Strangers approached him constantly, asking to hear the story of the attack, wanting to touch Thunder, to be near something that had survived the impossible. Some even claimed that touching the horse would bring them good fortune or protect them from harm. The healer, whose name was Doña Rosa, became a regular presence during Thunder's recovery. She visited every other day, checking the wounds and adjusting her treatments as needed. Over time, Miguel learned that she had been tending to animals and people for more than 40 years, inheriting her knowledge from her grandmother, who had learned it from her grandmother before that. The wisdom in her hands was generational, passed down through the ages like precious heirlooms. One afternoon, as she worked on cleaning Thunder's wounds, Doña Rosa spoke without looking up from her task. "You know, Miguel, in all my years, I've never seen an animal fight like this one did. Most creatures, when they encounter a predator that size, they either freeze or they flee. But Thunder, he fought, not just to survive, but to win. That's not instinct alone. That's something deeper, something that comes from the bond you two share." Miguel had been thinking similar thoughts, but hadn't known how to articulate them. "What do you mean, Doña Rosa? How can our bond make him fight harder?" She paused in her work, her weathered hands resting gently on Thunder's flank. "Animals know things we don't, Miguel. They sense the love we have for them, the loyalty, the trust. When you stayed on his back during that attack, when you threw yourself between him and those jaws, Thunder understood what that meant. He wasn't just fighting for his own life. He was fighting for yours, too, and for the life you share together. That kind of love, it gives strength that can't be measured or explained." Her words struck something deep in Miguel's heart. He had always known that he and Thunder shared a special connection, but hearing it described this way made him understand its true depth. They weren't just man and animal. They were family in the truest sense of the word, bound by experiences and emotions that transcended the normal boundaries between species. As Thunder's physical wounds healed, Miguel noticed changes in their relationship. The horse seemed more attuned to him now, more aware of his moods and emotions. When Miguel felt overwhelmed by the constant visitors, Thunder would position himself between his owner and the crowd, a gentle but firm barrier. When Miguel woke from nightmares about the attack, reliving those terrible moments in his sleep, Thunder would nicker softly, a sound of comfort and reassurance. One morning, about 2 weeks after the attack, Miguel woke to find Thunder standing over him, the horse's dark eyes watching him with an expression that seemed almost human in its concern. Miguel realized he had been crying in his sleep, tears streaming down his face from dreams he couldn't quite remember. He reached up to touch Thunder's muzzle, and the horse lowered his head, pressing his forehead against Miguel's chest in a gesture of such tenderness that it brought fresh tears to Miguel's eyes. "I'm sorry, boy. I should be taking care of you, not the other way around." Miguel's voice was thick with emotion as he ran his hands along Thunder's neck, feeling the warmth of the horse's body, the steady rhythm of his breathing. But Thunder seemed content in his role as comforter, standing patiently while Miguel worked through his emotions. The incident left Miguel shaken in ways he hadn't anticipated. During the attack, he had been too focused on survival to process the terror. Now, in the quiet moments of recovery, the full weight of what they had endured crashed down on him. He had flashbacks of the crocodile's massive jaws, of the moment when Thunder's legs had nearly given out, of how close they had come to dying together in those murky waters. The other villagers noticed Miguel's struggle. One evening, a group of men invited him to join them around a fire. They shared stories of their own encounters with danger, times when they had faced death and lived to tell about it. Their words helped Miguel understand that what he was feeling was normal, that the aftermath of trauma was often harder to survive than the event itself. An old fisherman named Julio spoke last, his voice gravelly with age and experience. "The river gives and the river takes, Miguel. You've seen both sides now. The important thing is that you and Thunder came back to us. Don't waste the gift of that second chance by dwelling on what might have been. Honor it by living fully, by appreciating every day you have with that magnificent animal." Miguel took those words to heart. He began to shift his focus from the trauma of the attack to the miracle of their survival. Instead of seeing Thunder's scars as reminders of a nightmare, he started viewing them as badges of courage, proof of the horse's indomitable spirit. The change in perspective helped ease the weight on his heart and allowed him to begin truly healing alongside Thunder. 3 weeks after the attack, Thunder took his first real walk beyond the immediate area where he had been recovering. Miguel walked beside him, leading him with a gentle hand on his halter, though the horse barely needed guidance. Thunder's steps were steady now, the stiffness that had marked his movements in the early days of healing largely gone. The wounds had closed cleanly, leaving raised scars that would never fully disappear, but served as testament to his survival. They walked through the village slowly, taking their time as curious faces appeared in doorways and windows. Children ran alongside them for a while, keeping a respectful distance, but unable to contain their excitement at seeing Thunder moving freely again. The horse tolerated their presence with patient dignity, occasionally turning his head to regard them with those deep, knowing eyes that seemed to hold wisdom beyond his years. As they passed the cantina, several men emerged, drinks in hand, to watch Thunder pass. One of them, a grizzled farmer named Esteban who had lived in the village all his life, removed his hat and held it over his heart in a gesture of respect. "I've seen many horses in my time, Miguel, but none like him. He's got the heart of a warrior and the soul of a saint. You're blessed to call him yours." Miguel nodded his thanks, touched by the sincerity in the old man's voice. The village had embraced Thunder's story in a way that went beyond simple fascination with a dramatic event. The horse had become a symbol of resilience, of the strength that emerges when facing impossible odds. In a community where life was often hard and unpredictable, where nature could be cruel and unforgiving, Thunder represented hope that courage and determination could overcome even the darkest moments. They continued their walk beyond the village boundaries, following a path that led up a gentle hill overlooking the valley. Miguel had chosen this route deliberately, wanting to reach a spot where they could see the river in the distance, but remain far enough away that the sight wouldn't trigger painful memories. When they reached the summit, Miguel stopped, and Thunder halted beside him, both of them gazing out at the landscape spread before them. The river wound through the valley like a silver ribbon, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. From this distance, it looked peaceful, almost inviting, giving no hint of the monster that lurked in its depths. Miguel felt a chill run down his spine as he remembered those terrible moments in the water. The weight of the crocodile's attack, the certain knowledge that death was seconds away. Beside him, Thunder shifted his weight, a subtle movement that drew Miguel's attention. The horse was staring at the river with an intensity that Miguel found unsettling. There was no fear in Thunder's gaze, but there was something else, a kind of recognition, perhaps, or maybe a challenge. It was as if Thunder was looking at an old adversary, acknowledging its presence while refusing to be intimidated by it. Miguel reached out to stroke Thunder's neck, feeling the powerful muscles beneath the sleek coat, muscles that had fought so hard to keep them both alive. "We don't have to go back there, boy. There are other crossings, safer routes. That river doesn't own us just because it tried to kill us." Miguel's words were as much for himself as for Thunder, a reminder that they had choices, that they weren't defined by their trauma. But even as he spoke, Miguel knew that eventually they would have to face the river again. His ranch was on the other side. His livelihood depended on being able to move his animals across when needed. They couldn't avoid it forever, couldn't let fear dictate the boundaries of their lives. The question was when they would be ready, when the wounds would be healed enough, both physical and emotional, to attempt another crossing. Thunder turned away from the river view and began walking back down the hill, his pace unhurried but purposeful. Miguel followed, struck by the way the horse seemed to have made his own decision about when the viewing was sufficient. There was an independence in Thunder now that hadn't been there before, a confidence born from having survived the worst and emerged victorious. Over the following days, Thunder's strength continued to return. He began eating with the appetite of his former self, and the shine returned to his coat as his body recovered from the ordeal. Doña Rosa declared him past the critical period, though she cautioned that the scars would remain tender for months, and that Thunder should avoid strenuous activity until fully healed. Miguel listened to her advice carefully, determined not to push his companion too hard too soon. The visitors continued to come, though in smaller numbers as the novelty began to fade and people returned to their own lives and concerns. Miguel was grateful for the reduction in attention, though he appreciated how the community had rallied around them during the crisis. The experience had taught him something about the value of neighbors, about how people could come together in times of need, even when resources were scarce and life was difficult. One afternoon, a young boy approached Miguel with a shy smile and a piece of paper clutched in his small hand. He had drawn a picture of Thunder facing the crocodile, the horse rearing up magnificently while the monster cowered below. The proportions were all wrong and the colors were crude, but the emotion captured in the child's artwork was profound. It showed Thunder as a hero, larger than life, unstoppable in his courage. Miguel knelt down to the boy's level and accepted the drawing with genuine appreciation. "This is beautiful. Thank you for making this for Thunder and me. Would you like to pet him?" The boy's eyes went wide with excitement and fear in equal measure, but he nodded eagerly. Miguel guided the small hand to Thunder's shoulder, and the horse stood perfectly still, patient as always with children. A month after the attack, Thunder was declared fully recovered by Doña Rosa. She removed the last of the bandages, revealing scars that had healed into pale lines across Thunder's hindquarters and legs. These marks would remain forever, a permanent record of the day Thunder had faced death and refused to yield. Miguel traced the scars with gentle fingers, each line a reminder of how close he had come to losing his dearest companion. The time had come to make a decision that Miguel had been avoiding. His cattle and other horses were still on the northern pasture, being tended by neighbors who had generously offered their help during Thunder's recovery. But Miguel couldn't impose on their kindness indefinitely. He needed to return to his ranch, to resume his life, and that meant crossing the river again. The question that haunted his nights was whether he could find the courage to face those waters once more. Thunder seemed to sense Miguel's inner turmoil. The horse had become even more attentive since the attack, watching Miguel with an awareness that bordered on uncanny. When Miguel stood at the window staring toward the river, Thunder would come stand beside him. When Miguel paced restlessly in the night, unable to sleep, Thunder would nicker softly from his pen, a sound of comfort and solidarity. One morning, Miguel woke with a sense of clarity that had been absent for weeks. He knew what needed to be done, and he knew that delaying would only make it harder. He found Thunder already awake, standing alert in the early morning light, as if he too had been waiting for this moment. Miguel approached slowly, resting his forehead against Thunder's neck, breathing in the familiar scent of horse and hay that had been part of his life for so long. "We need to go back, boy. not to that same crossing, but we need to face the river again. If we don't, if we let fear win, then that crocodile will have taken something from us that we can never get back. Our freedom, our courage, our ability to live without being controlled by what happened. Do you understand? Thunder exhaled heavily, a sound that might have been agreement or resignation or simply acknowledgement. Miguel chose to interpret it as the first, as a sign that his companion was ready to move forward, to reclaim what they had almost lost. He spent the rest of the morning preparing, checking equipment, planning their route, and informing the neighbors of his intentions. Word spread quickly through the village, as it always did in small communities where everyone knew everyone else's business. By afternoon, a small crowd had gathered, people who wanted to see Thunder and Miguel off, to offer their support and well wishes. Some brought food for the journey, others offered prayers and blessings. The attention was both touching and overwhelming, a reminder of how their story had impacted so many lives. Julio, the old fisherman who had counseled Miguel after the attack, pushed through the crowd with his weathered face set in serious lines. He carried a long staff carved from dark wood, its surface smooth from years of handling. This belonged to my grandfather, and his grandfather before him. It's seen me through many dangers on the water. I want you to have it, Miguel, not because I think you'll need it, but as a reminder that courage is something we carry with us, passed down through generations. Miguel accepted the staff with genuine gratitude, feeling the weight of tradition and trust in the worn wood. The gift meant more than any weapon could, representing the community's faith in him and Thunder, their belief that the pair would overcome whatever challenges lay ahead. He secured it to Thunder's saddle, positioning it where he could reach it quickly if needed, but where it wouldn't interfere with riding. The journey to the alternate crossing point took most of the day. Miguel had chosen a route that would take them far from the site of the attack, to a place where the river was wider but shallower, where visibility was better and the current less treacherous. Other villagers had used this crossing successfully in recent weeks, reporting no sign of the giant crocodile or any other unusual predators. Still, Miguel's heart pounded with each step that brought them closer to the water. They arrived at the crossing as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The river here looked different, less intimidating somehow, though Miguel knew that might be an illusion created by desperation and necessity. Several farmers were waiting on the far side with Miguel's cattle and other horses, ready to help with the crossing. Their presence was reassuring, a reminder that he and Thunder wouldn't be facing this alone. Miguel dismounted and walked to the water's edge, Thunder following close behind. He knelt and placed his hand in the current, feeling its cool strength, testing its pull. The water was clear enough that he could see the rocky bottom, could confirm there were no hidden dangers lurking in the depths. Still, his hands trembled as he stood and turned to face Thunder. The horse met his gaze with calm acceptance. There was no fear in Thunder's eyes, no hesitation in his stance. If anything, Thunder seemed eager to proceed, as if he understood that this crossing represented more than just a physical journey. It was a reclamation of their lives, a refusal to be defined by trauma, a declaration that they were still the same team they had always been, perhaps even stronger for what they had endured together. Miguel mounted Thunder slowly, settling into the saddle with familiar ease, despite the tension that made his muscles tight. He gathered the reins in hands that were steadier than he expected, drawing strength from Thunder's calm presence beneath him. Around them, the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if they would truly go through with this, if they could overcome the memories that surely must be screaming at them to turn back. Thunder stepped into the water, and Miguel felt every muscle in his body tense with remembered terror. The sound of water splashing against Thunder's legs triggered memories so vivid that for a moment Miguel was back in that other crossing, fighting for their lives against an ancient monster. His breath came quick and shallow, his grip on the reins tightening until his knuckles turned white. But Thunder moved forward steadily, his steps sure and confident, as if drawing on some reservoir of courage that the attack had created rather than depleted. The water rose to Thunder's knees, then to his chest, and Miguel forced himself to breathe deeply, to stay present in this moment rather than lost in the nightmare of the past. The current here was gentler, the bottom more stable, and the clarity of the water allowed them to see that nothing lurked beneath the surface. These facts registered in Miguel's mind, slowly pushing back the panic that threatened to overwhelm him. Thunder's calm demeanor helped even more, the horse's unwavering focus serving as an anchor for Miguel's swirling emotions. They reached the deepest point of the crossing, where the water came nearly to Thunder's shoulders. This was the moment when Miguel's control almost broke, when every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to flee to the safety of solid ground. His heart hammered so hard he could hear it pounding in his ears, drowning out the sound of the water, the distant voices of the farmers on the far shore. Everything except the primal fear that gripped him. Then Thunder did something unexpected. The horse paused in the middle of the river and turned his head back toward Miguel, their eyes meeting in a moment of perfect understanding. In Thunder's gaze, Miguel saw no fear, no hesitation, only a quiet confidence and an unspoken message that seemed to say they had survived worse together, that they could handle this. It was as if the horse was offering reassurance to his human companion, reversing their usual roles in a way that was both humbling and empowering. Miguel felt something shift inside him. The fear didn't disappear completely, might never disappear entirely, but it transformed into something manageable, something he could carry without being crushed by its weight. He loosened his grip on the reins, allowing Thunder to feel his renewed confidence through the connection between them. The horse immediately resumed moving forward, his powerful legs carrying them steadily through the water toward the far shore. As they emerged from the river, water streaming from Thunder's body and Miguel's clothes, a cheer went up from the farmers who had been watching anxiously. They crowded around, offering congratulations and expressing their admiration for both horse and rider. Miguel barely heard their words, too focused on the profound sense of accomplishment flooding through him. They had done it. They had faced their fear and conquered it, proving that trauma didn't have to be the end of their story but could instead become a new beginning. Miguel dismounted and threw his arms around Thunder's neck, not caring that his clothes were soaked or that people were watching. Tears streamed down his face, releasing weeks of accumulated tension, fear, and relief. Thunder stood patiently, accepting Miguel's embrace as he had accepted everything else that had passed between them, with grace and unwavering loyalty. In that moment, Miguel understood fully what Doña Rosa had tried to tell him weeks earlier about the bond they shared. It was something beyond words, beyond rational explanation, a connection forged in crisis and strengthened by mutual trust. The return to the ranch felt like a homecoming in more ways than one. The familiar sight of his modest buildings, his land, the animals he had left in others' care, all of it welcomed Miguel back with the comfort of the known and the loved. But everything looked different somehow, as if the experience with Thunder had fundamentally changed how he perceived his world. What had once seemed ordinary now appeared precious, each moment a gift not to be taken for granted. In the days that followed, life returned to something resembling normalcy. Miguel resumed his daily routines of caring for his animals, maintaining his property, and participating in village life. But the experience had marked him in ways that would never fade. He found himself more patient, more appreciative of small beauties, more willing to help neighbors who faced their own struggles. The near-death experience had taught him about the fragility of life and the importance of living fully while one could. Thunder thrived in the familiar surroundings of home. The scars on his body remained visible reminders of his courage, but they seemed to bother him not at all. If anything, the horse carried himself with even more confidence than before, as if having faced the ultimate test and passed it, he no longer doubted his own strength. Other horses seemed to sense this quality in him, treating Thunder with a deference that bordered on reverence. Visitors still came occasionally to see the legendary horse, though Miguel discouraged too much attention, wanting Thunder to live as normally as possible. Those who did visit often left changed by the experience, inspired by the story of survival and resilience. Parents brought their children to meet Thunder, using his example to teach lessons about courage, loyalty, and never giving up even when circumstances seem impossible. Years would pass, and Thunder would eventually grow old, his magnificent body slowing with age as all living things must. But the bond between him and Miguel would never diminish, would never be anything less than the profound connection forged in those desperate moments when they fought together for survival. They had faced death as a team and had emerged not just alive, but transformed, proof that courage and love could overcome even the darkest trials. As the sun set over the valley that evening, Miguel stood beside Thunder, watching the light fade into dusk. The river flowed in the distance, eternal and indifferent, but it no longer held power over them. They had reclaimed their lives, their freedom, their joy. They were survivors, warriors, friends bound by an experience that few would ever truly understand, but that defined everything they had become. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new work to be done, but tonight was for gratitude, for rest, and for the quiet celebration of simply being alive together.